So, and it was actually a community member, if I will, Ms. Elise. She always says, like, don't allow people to use slang terms like Obamacare when it's really the Affordable Health Care Act,
Mhm.
or DEI when it is diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it allows people to sort of I don't want to say dumb it down, but dumb it down and make it seem as if it's just, it's like, no, call it out. I mean,
Yeah.
you're pretty much saying, I want to go back to segregation, is what you're saying. But what's interesting is when you start saying exactly what it is, then you realize, oh, wait, you mean to tell me that as a woman, I'm considered under this DEI tag? Yes,
Mhm. Yeah.
ma'am, we said that.
It's
We
not
were
someone
saying
else.
that.
That's the thing is when we fight each other over things, it's that I feel like I saw this cartoon many years ago. Like there's a plate of cookies and there's this guy and he takes 10 of them and there's one left. And the two people on the other side of the table start fighting each other for the one instead of turning to the guy who took 10 and saying, dude, what is your problem? And I feel like, and we're going to talk about gender issues. So I was thinking about that the other day that I saw the picture of the executive order on trans athletes being signed, and it was all these little girls, and I was just like, "Why are they going to be like that? Like this isn't
Ooh,
threatening to women, but it's
not
the same
even.
thing. We've got a bunch of women fighting other women over the one cookie instead
Yeah,
of recognizing that actually they're not your problem.
no.
They're not the reason things are hard. They're not the reason your girls don't have opportunities. They're
Mm-mm,
actually on your team. And if
mm,
we really want to be successful, we have to start recognizing who's on our team and who isn't. And it's heartbreaking to me because it's so predictable
oh,
and it calls on things. Of course, when you're sitting there and someone's like, "Oh, this person's between you and your opportunities." Yeah, you can get riled up. And at the same time, it's not really the case. They are
yeah.
not the reason. Like, it's just like immigrants are not the reason you don't have a job, and and they're not the reason the economy sucks. And you're like, I'm at any rate
Right.
to keep this somewhat on topic, but it's just
Yeah. It's on topic. So before we get into the topic of the day, as I'm thinking to myself, like, do I have it all together? I think I do. Um,
I mean,
how are
always.
you feeling? Like, how are you feeling? It's a
I
very long year. It was January.
Yeah, it's been a long year the last couple weeks. I am it's right. Like, it's a hard question to answer. My personal life is great. I
Yeah.
feel very happy. I have great friends, great community. Thank you for being part of both of those. And um, I feel like we are in one of those tumultuous times.
Yes.
And I try to keep on that. I don't like to be Pollyanna. I don't like to
No.
pretend to think. What I talk about is being an apocalyptimist. I
Mm,
recognize that things are rough and there's not a lot of influence or power that I necessarily have. And I'm still going to do what I can, even if I
mhm.
don't think it's going to make a difference, because I might as well, because doing nothing will definitely not make a difference. It'll
Yeah,
just help.
for sure.
And it's not about outcomes. I think that's the biggest thing is I don't think that there's a savior. I don't think anyone with enough power to change the world is to be trusted anyway. So I think it's really about all of us doing what we can where we can, noticing that one thing, that something that we can do, and then doing that. And it could be as simple as helping your neighbor,
Yeah.
calling a friend, picking up
Yeah.
groceries. And I recognize that can feel very simplistic in terms of the larger picture, and for some people there's something is a bigger influence, right? And go do that.
Mhm.
But because we can't solve everything, I think sometimes we get stuck on, since I can't do everything, I might as well do nothing. And
Yes.
we forget to do the something that is actually ours to do. And if we do one thing every day that's ours to do together, I do believe we can make a difference. And I think we are in a time of transition,
Mhm.
and transition is always unsettling and hard, and it can be very scary. And because we honestly have lived in such stability for such a long time, we aren't
Yes.
really used to it. We don't, as a culture, I don't think we manage it particularly well. So,
Mm.
um, getting amped up or riled up or panicking, which I understand why that happens for folks. No, no diminishment on the reasons for that. And that makes you so much more likely to be manipulated. When you
That's
are
where I was
riled
going to
up,
go.
it's so much easier for someone to point you in a direction that
Yes.
maybe wouldn't go any other time. And so that's why it's like, take breaks. Like, you have a lot of
Mhm.
great advice about taking breaks, go outside, do the one thing that you can today, find ways to be informed that don't drive you crazy.
Right.
There's a couple of news sources I really like. One of them is improvethenews.org. I've mentioned them before.
Mhm.
Another one is Snopes.com. They
Yes.
do a lot of fact checking. So I always, anytime someone sends me something that riles me up, I go check on Snopes just to make sure it's real. Unfortunately, some of them are, but still. And then the other one I really like is What Can Go Right.
Mm.
It's a news organization that looks for things that are happening, and they're not, once again, they're not Pollyanna, but they also, that's where I learned about, they made a battery that functions like a lithium battery, but they use salt. They use
Oh.
ocean salt. So there's like a lot of progress that's happening that doesn't necessarily get amplified. And
Yeah.
so they cover science and politics and culture. And so I get their newsletter, and I try to read it when it comes in, because it gives me a lot of like information, but without a lot of that the
Mm.
drama, I guess.
Yes. The gloom and doom.
The gloom and doom. Or
Because the gloom and
the
doom is
or
easy.
the banging of patriotic drums. I mean, patriotic
Yeah.
drums and gloom and doom are just different sides of the same coin, and they're really great ways to manipulate people into doing things
Yes.
that are not necessarily good for them or
Mhm.
any of us.
And it's by design. This mass chaos, this flutter of, you know, shoot and spray 5,000 executive orders. It is by design to
Mhm,
literally wear you down mentally and emotionally,
mhm,
which is why I second everything you said. Go outside, get in the sun, talk to people. It doesn't mean to not be informed and to not be aware. It is just saying protect your peace, because we have a very long road to travel. And if you give
mhm.
in early, it's over.
Yeah.
So you gotta protect that. Let
Mhm.
us get some theme music, because we about to get into it.
Mhm.
Hold and hold and hold. With all that is going on, we could literally fill like 3 calendars worth of conversation, because it's so
Mhm.
ridiculous.
Mhm.
So ridiculous. But I go back to, it is by design. It is
Mhm.
by design to, as you say, get you riled up. It is a distraction, because there's always a money grab involved.
Mhm.
It's always about the money. So it's designed to get you all riled up, get you in your feelings, make you feel hopeless, less than, what's the point? And then
Mhm.
it becomes, so what's the point? Yes, do not give in. Stay informed, be strategic. I like your idea of getting very particular newsletters. Like I said, I get my 10 to 15 minutes of clips, and then I'm out for the day. It's like I'm
Mhm.
over the news. I'm out. As long as I know what's going on, I'm good. But
Yeah.
but I will still call the family, still go sit outside in the sun, still go walk, enjoy, because you got to put on a different kind of armor when you have these kind of people who are literally attempting to burn down the life we know as the United States
Mhm.
democracy.
Yeah.
Literally working every day. And all I can think to myself is like, what? Like, what? What? Really? Seriously? Now, in my opinion, before we start our conversation, I kind of feel, no, I'm not going to say kind of. I believe there are still a huge chunk of American citizens who are like in la la land. Like, it can't happen here. It can't. So clearly, you guys have not watched The Handmaid's Tale. Girl, it was the whole deal of, no, they'll never do that. Or they'll use the playbook like from 9/11, where something happens and you quickly pass legislation.
Yeah.
people more power than necessary. And next thing you know, all your rights are gone.
Yeah.
Or you're ultra surveilled, which we got to talk about still sometime.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
I'm like,
I think I remember, like, I've watched movies, growing up I grew up in the Cold War era, and there were movies about the KGB and of course movies about 1930s Germany.
mm,
And I was reflecting recently that the number of times the people who were taken away to be, disappeared or beaten or whatever, they were so surprised. Always. They're like, "What are you doing here? Who, why?" And I think that speaks to your point, is that because most of us, and I honestly think a lot of the folks that uh might have a different political ideology than I do, they would honestly be equally surprised.
mhm,
They think it's fear mongering. They think that
mhm,
it's inflammation, right? And part of the reason they believe that is because they would never do it. They
right.
would never do that. They might not, like, want me as a woman to be in charge, or you as a Black woman to hold whatever, but they wouldn't arrest you for it, or like, so they only imagine as far as they would go. And they
Mhm,
don't understand that if you give power to people who want it as badly as some of the folks that are currently in power do, they might have a broader uh amorality, if you will,
yes.
and they're going to be surprised. And I've even talked to some conservative folks that I knew. A friend of mine from Texas worked in healthcare, and we were talking about overturning of Roe v. Wade. And we were like, yeah, no, she works in healthcare, and she's struggling because she's seen people get turned in for going to other states to get abortions. And the person I was talking to said, well, that's not how it was intended. And I'm like, I know that's how you would never intend it. However, what's not always clear is that if you give the extremists the power, they will use it.
Yes.
And people just don't think of them as extremists because they're not extreme. And so it's that I just don't, I mean, I think we lost something when we lost the ability to engage with people who have a different
Yep.
way. Like
Civil discourse.
civil discourse. And also, like, I used to run the LGBTQ Center in Boulder. And when I was running it, we were part of a statewide coalition on immigration equity. And so was the Catholic Church. And this coalition had, I want over 100 organizations participating. And we were very effective. And at the same time I was on that coalition, we were protesting the Catholic Church in Boulder because of some behavior they had done towards some gay people there.
Mm,
But that didn't come up at the immigration thing. And I feel like people don't understand. You can do both. You can say, oh,
yes.
this is because I believe in, I'm showing up here.
Mhm,
You are harming people I care about. I'm opposing you here. It doesn't have to be either or like this. And
yes.
we have really lost our way, in my personal opinion.
Mhm. It's either this way or no way. It's like both things can be true.
Right. You can disagree with someone soundly. And if they're going to work on an issue you agree with, have them show up and do their part.
Yes.
Just keep it narrow. That was what I asked the leaders of the coalition, because they have people from across the spectrum, right? That
Mhm.
would in other places not work together. And they said, we're very careful to keep the coalition tightly focused on this issue. Like, if people try to bring other things in, it's a no. Because
Mhm.
the minute that they did, it would
Mhm.
become this whole other thing, and we get nowhere. And
Mhm.
it was a very successful coalition. They did a great job.
Well,
So,
since you're talking about working together
mm,
and having I will say, a laser-like focus on one thing, let's talk about today's topic, shall we?
ooh, yes.
What's on the menu? It is going to be gender affirming care. That is what's on the menu. And I'm going to let you start off because you had a really great point about this. And in the midst of discussing it, I would love if you would also share some misconceptions about gender affirming care. So, Ms. Aicila, please, would you?
Well, so part of what brought this to my attention is there's obviously a lot of national political discourse on transgender people and how they are accessing services or healthcare. And there's a lot of misconceptions and fear around this. And I think what people don't understand, or perhaps they're not totally getting, is that when we use the term gender affirming care, while yes, specifically trans people do access it as well, it's actually a broader term. So if I put on makeup and lipstick and I grow my hair long to emphasize that I am female, that's considered a gender affirming behavior, right? And one of the statistics that I find very interesting that was released in July of 2024 is that there was very little to no utilization of gender affirming surgeries by transgender and gender diverse minors in the US. The
Really?
study found that cisgender minors and adults had substantially higher utilization of gender affirming surgeries. So, for people that aren't aware, cisgender means your body matches your gender identity. And the youth that primarily get breast reduction surgery are young men who have, I think it's called gynoplasty. They have
Yes.
large breasts,
Mm-hmm.
and there's something like 200 or 300 surgeries a year done so that those young men can feel
Mm-hmm.
more like their body matches their gender identity. Their gender expression is male in the way that they feel is appropriate for them and their standards in society. And by and I don't know how the laws are written. I really don't. But I feel like the way that they're writing these laws, it's going to harm not just the small number of transgender people, which also feels so bullying to me. I can't even.
Yes, it is.
It also is going to harm these young men and who are legitimately, because frankly our society can be kind of mean. We got a
Yes.
lot, we have a little bit of a bullying culture, and especially for young boys now they might not have this option. And if they do have the option, then it makes it very clear that this has nothing to do with gender affirming care. This
Yes.
has to do with a deep prejudice and ignorance against people who don't quite fit in. And it's ignorant as well that genetically speaking, there are many more genders than just two.
Perfect pause, because I know of some young men who, right around that height of puberty, there was this extra hormones, what have you, that, all of a sudden these young men are creating breasts, which goes back to the whole deal of there's so much about the human body we don't understand. And I get that we want
Mhm.
to fit in one of two boxes, but the fact of the matter is humans are just like all these other animals. We got some weird stuff going on. Plain and simple. Weird, but yet natural stuff that is going on.
Yeah.
Just because you want to make it so simple, it's like, but that's not the real world. The real world is there's a lot that happens here, there, and the other that is just natural. That, for you to try to make things fit a certain way because that's how you see the world, it's asking for a lot. So I have to wonder, with the way these laws are written, that yeah, the people who would be impacted the most are those who, if the medicine doesn't help them reduce this fatty breast tissue, then
Mhm.
the surgery is the next idea.
Yeah.
And if they can't get it, what does that look like? Now, we all remember our time as an adolescent. I didn't have
We'll
some
just try really hard to forget it, but like,
I didn't have some great times at Aicila. I was like, can we just get through this already? Can we
yeah.
please? So you already have kids who are cruel animals who can say some really awful things.
Yeah.
And then you add these, I'll just say natural anomalies, because I don't know how else to
Mhm.
really say it. I mean, it's natural. It just happens. It just happens. And you don't know until you hit that little point in life, and it's like, I don't understand why, as a guy, this is happening to me.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like we let me take one more pause. Let me put one more thought out here. I always say to myself, when people go gung ho about someone who doesn't look like them, I often believe somewhere on the inside, there's that self projection of
Yeah.
hate,
Mhm.
right? Like the number of heterosexual men who go all in on the drag queens and everything else, I am thinking somewhere deep down inside, you're feeling a little jealousy because this person is accepting and walking in who they are.
Yeah.
And then you secretly wish that could be you. Because
Yeah.
why do you care so much? I have never, and I want to say you and I talked about it like maybe once, maybe not on the show, but this obsession with what bathroom you go to. Who does that? Who does that? when I'm out at a restaurant or at the park or at the mall and I gotta go, I just gotta go.
Mhm.
I don't
Right.
say, knock, knock. Is that a woman in there? Knock, knock. Are you a woman too? Who, like, nobody, like, who does that? Who
No,
does it?
no one. I mean, it's very weird, right?
Oh, it's, I say, I believe it's a sickness. And I have to wonder if, again, there are some other thoughts going on in there that lead you down a path that doesn't even begin to make sense to someone who is like sane. Like
Yeah.
there's some illness in there, some perhaps some self-hatred, but clearly an illness. Because who like with all the things happening, and I go back to those distractions, you want to sign a law that one, there's only men and women, and then I should say executive order. And then you do this one where no one trans can play women's sports because girls sports are for girls. Ain't nobody worried about this shit. Ain't nobody.
No. Well, and
Years.
it also creates this weird infantilization of women, biological women, however you want to call it, where it's like, oh, you're not going to be able to compete unless we make sure you're protected from the possibility of somebody who we've deemed male, right? Like, so that's once again, like, obviously, if someone who we deem male is competing, you're going to lose. And it's this like reinforcement of this, like, women are less than, women are less capable, women aren't, going to be able to rise to the occasion. And to be clear, I 100% see trans women as women. And when I step into this other mentality that I can see happening, I'm like, this just reinforces for all of these young girls that they're never going to be enough when competing with someone who isn't also genetically, biologically, whatever it is. And it's just like, that's ridiculous. And this idea that how you look is so, I mean, let me step back. I want to speak to your point because many years ago, there was a research study done, and I have no idea if I can track this down. So I apologize right now for referencing something I can't necessarily provide. But they were studying why people would get uncomfortable. Like if I came out to you as a lesbian, not you specifically, because we would talk about it. A lot of times, like families and friends would be okay with it, but they would never want to talk about it again. And they did this study, and they realized it was because, and they talked to all these people, and it was because the straight person, if you will, or the person who was receiving you coming out, was afraid they were going to catch it if they talked about it. Now, totally insane, right? However, it wasn't the minute it became a conscious thought for the people, they were like, oh, that's dumb. But that was the discomfort. And it a little makes sense, not as much now, but like in the past, because you didn't really hear about it until someone came out. And so there was this fear, there was a lot of propaganda that said, like, if you show kids gay people, they'll become gay, right? As opposed to understanding that people are attracted to who they are. And, there's a lot more people who are bi than anything else, right? Like, and, but there was that was the equivalency that was made in the propaganda. It was, if kids see gay things, like two men holding hands, that's going to make them gay. Like, so there's this idea that you could catch it. And the minute that they started exposing that as a thing, they were like, oh, okay, no, it's not going to happen. Like if you and I talk about me dating women, you're not going to suddenly start dating women. That's not going to happen. But you know that you're not uncomfortable, but someone else needs it. And I feel like some of what we're seeing with the trans community is similar, that we live in a lot of uncertainty. And suddenly they're like, can I even be certain about my own gender?
That's what it is.
If there's too much transgender, non-binary stuff, am I going to catch it? And the truth is, like, maybe, like, because the most of us don't fit cleanly into these gender boxes that we've been assigned on these arbitrary conditions, right? Like, and so, yeah, if more transgender and non-binary people are present and accepting themselves and open, more people will feel comfortable acknowledging parts of themselves. So I think what you're talking about, but I think it's also that fear, not just of their own feelings, but like that because that's how the propaganda works. It's like, oh, if you're around it too much, you'll catch it.
What was that? In the birdcage. Remember that scene in the birdcage at the very end where they're trying to leave and he's dressed as a drag queen. Nobody wants to dance with him.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't want to be the only girl out here without anybody to dance with. I'm attractive.
Yeah.
He said, I look as good as the rest of them. And I thought, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I used to, so like men get paid more than women. And I used
Yes.
to think that was like because they learned how to negotiate or something. And then they did a study that trans men, their income increases something like 11% after they transition, and trans women, their income decreases.
Wow.
And so it's really absolutely this fundamental underlying affirmation that we have of male presenting people. And then what I see here is there's a lot of insecurity around it. Like the men in charge right now are like, oh, if we actually stop like creating barriers for women and people of color and trans people, we're definitely not going to be able to compete. That's the only way I can read it, is a
Oh, yeah.
massive insecurity because they're so used to things just working for them.
Yes. I mean, it's mediocre. But what's interesting, and we may have to dig into this
We
some
might have to go
other
back to
day.
gender affirming care.
I know,
But
right? Like this is the after dinner. But Caitlyn Jenner
mm-hmm.
clearly still acts and behaves as a white heterosexual man.
Mm-hmm.
Still. Like the amount of privilege, it is still there. Like I don't believe she sees herself as what she is. I don't see it. But that's for another day, people.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna have to come back to that one because I'm just like, some of the stuff she says and how she behaves, she still sees herself as being a white man, plain and simple.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about misconceptions, and then you talked about how there are things that are part of the gender affirming care that everybody, I'll say everybody uses, although like everybody is certain people, but everybody uses. So when I was doing my research on this, I couldn't help but notice how they kept saying it's really for transgender people, it's really people who are non-binary, but HRT, yeah. Now I'm perimenopausal.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's
I'm barely
intense.
making it, Aicila. I mean, some days it is
Mm-hmm.
hard.
Yeah.
But the number of women who need hormone replacement therapy has
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with being transgender or non-binary. Nada.
Right.
And yet and still we overlook it and we say, oh no, it's only for these people.
Right. When it's tricky because I know like when the AIDS crisis happened, like there was not a lot of sympathy until Ryan White got a transfusion. And it's like, come on, guys, seriously, could you understand that this affects people like and whatever? And similarly, so it sort of bothers me like that we have to remind people that actually like hormone replacement therapy is for women who are going through any sort of like they could have ovarian cancer or breast cancer and need that. They could have a hysterectomy. There's a lot of reasons. Hormones regulate so much of your body, and they are so important to have them balanced and correctly there. And so we like it's just care, right? However, sometimes it is for things like I get my hair cut, or hormone replacement therapy can allow you to keep your skin stays nicer, like you stay a little bit like more. Sometimes it helps with brain fog. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. You've got gorgeous skin, but to want that for yourself, right? To feel good about yourself and your body, and especially as an older woman, right? Because we don't super value older women. That to me, it feels like that should be equally valuable
Yes.
and to remember that, like, if I want that for me or for my daughter, why can't I want that for my trans sisters and community? Why can't I just say like, and it's that othering and it's that fear piece, like, and I remember when I started working in the trans community like 2001. It's a way long time ago. And I remember the first time I was talking to this woman who was volunteering, and I realized I had this moment of stumbling. Like I didn't know what pronoun to use, and I felt kind of stupid, and that felt bad, right? And so then I could have put that on her, right? And said, "Oh, I feel bad because of her." But it was because I felt uncertain about something that I was really used to not having to think about. And so I really understand when people have that moment. I have a little less empathy for it today because there's so many resources online and so many places that you can go for answers. I also understand there's a huge propaganda machine that's sort of like, be scared. But it's really that, like, they put their discomfort on
Mhm.
the person instead of understanding it's actually their discomfort. And it's really not hard. Like, and even recently, like, I was in a group with someone, and I referenced their pronoun correctly, and they just corrected me. And then you know what happened? I said sorry, and I used the right one, and
Mhm.
nothing else happened. But people get so afraid that if they get
It's
it
just being
wrong, there's gonna be
respectful.
some, like, lightning strike. I've been doing this for 24 years, and I
Yes,
still sometimes trip up. And
yes,
I've never had anyone do anything other than say, "Oh, hey, by the way," and it's like, "Oh, got it."
yes.
And that's it. Like, it's really not hard.
I tend to ask for grace first. I tend to say, "Please forgive me if I misspeak, but
Yeah.
feel good and correct me." Because you do want to, it's a simple thing of being respectful.
Mhm.
That's all it is. This whole deal of it goes against my values. It ain't even about you. It's not about you. It's
Right.
not about you. You talking to somebody else has nothing to do with you and your values. Not one thing. It's a cop out. It's an excuse to pass on the hate. It,
Mhm.
that is. And a poor excuse at that, if you ask me.
Mhm. And
It's
it's
an excuse to
lazy.
pass on the hate, and it's lazy.
It's
It's
really
lazy.
lazy.
Ugh. But as we're talking about some other gender affirming care, what about this one? I said, what now?
Mhm.
Aicila. Do we even want to? I didn't bring, you know what? I didn't bring any numbers to
I might have
discuss
some.
the
Let's see.
people who get cosmetic surgery. Didn't even get the numbers.
Mhm.
But that is gender affirming care, as we know.
Mhm.
But how many people who are not transgender get cosmetic surgery? I mean,
Mhm.
if you look at if you look at the TV and YouTube and all the media, there's a lot of people who are rocking what they naturally wear today.
Of the 3 people that I know that have had nose jobs, 2 of them were men.
Mm,
Like, we have this idea of it being a thing for a
yes,
gender, and
yes.
it's actually, we live in a very visual society, if you will,
Mhm,
and a lot of people find that that helps them to feel better about themselves.
mhm.
And I'll be honest, when I was younger, I really struggled with it because I felt like it was such a superficial thing. Like, not that the person was superficial, but I was like, that seems like so much harm to do to yourself to look away. And I had braces. They were kind of painful. Like,
Right. Kind of
you know,
painful? They were
they were
painful. Girl,
painful.
don't lie, Aisla. Don't even lie. Them bitches were painful.
They're painful. And so it's, I mean, it's, the thing is that it's so, I don't know what it is, but it's so easy to get into this idea, like, I wouldn't do it, so therefore it's weird.
Yes.
And instead of saying, well, I would do this thing,
Mhm,
and it made me feel better about myself.
mhm.
And I think that's okay. Like, I feel like there's this, it's tricky because, yes, society reinforces certain ways of looking. And
Yes.
I think that I would love to see us create more support for people feeling simply good where they are, because I don't think that we do very well at that in a larger sense.
We suck at it.
And it's like, you know, at the same time, this is the society that we're in.
Mhm.
And this is what we're dealing with. If this helps somebody to feel comfortable and more confident in who they are, whether they are a man who wants a nose job, or a young boy who wants breast surgery so that he can feel more masculine,
Mhm.
or a woman who wants a breast implant, or a transgender person that wants to feel more affirmed in how they see themselves.
Yeah.
I think it's all equally valid.
Yeah. I know for myself, like I learned a few weeks back that one very popular surgery for men is calf surgery,
Oh,
getting
really?
their calves sculpted. Yeah. I was like, what? Hey, to each his own. I mean, people have done all kinds of things. For me personally, would I ever do it? I wouldn't. But that's because I believe in whatever you were given with. You gotta learn how to rock it, like put stuff into it. But everyone doesn't get to that place of being comfortable. right? I
Mhm.
mean, people ask me all the time, are you a cancer survivor? Because I keep my hair short. It's like, no. They're like, you purposely did that, as if I, Isla, we need to come back into a whole beauty segment.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was like, yeah, because I get that in so many women, having hair is a sign of being feminine, which is why, like in some schools, the dress code is young men can't have long hair. That's only
Yep.
for women. And
Right?
vice versa, right? It's like, no, for some women, long hair is a shield. It's their armor. And the moment you go to cut it, they feel less than feminine.
Yep.
Now, the attack on your breast is already its thing, right? Because that's
Mhm.
already a thing of, if you take my breast and I'm less than. So there's this whole other thing there. But I got to a place of, I am going to define what's beautiful for Gwendolyn. Now, keep in mind, I'm a Black chick.
Mhm.
By definition, I'm not matching what society sees
Yeah.
anyway, right? Because you'll get well, you're cute for a Black girl. Let me catch all of my all of my language today. So like, people say stuff thinking they're a compliment to you, and I'm thinking that's the most
Mhm.
ignorant statement I've heard today thus far.
You're like,
Just
just
today.
say.
And
Wow.
it's only 10 o'clock. But no, don't know. Now, in the beginning, I never call people on it. I call folks on it now.
Mhm.
Back to the whole deal of cosmetic surgery. So, although I myself wouldn't do it, for those who feel the need to do it, I was like, do whatever you want to do, because it's your body and you're grown. Have at it.
Yeah.
I
And
always wonder, though, is how much is enough? Because I always thought, if you're trying to fix something that you believe is broken, you're never going to get there.
Mhm.
I've seen folks do ear surgery to like pull their ears back to make them, to kind of, they're,
Mhm.
hey, whatever.
Yeah.
And we see folks who get addicted to multiple surgeries trying to fix something because there's something going on
Yeah.
up in here,
Mhm.
that no matter what you do out here, it's not going to change that, because
Yeah.
you see yourself. It would be the same thing as people who get any kind of weight loss
Yep.
procedures, and they still see themselves as being a larger person, although their body physically is smaller. The mind is saying some other thing, and they can do the work to get rid of all the extra skin and everything else, and they're still not there.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a really important point, because I feel like that's one of the biggest differences between people who choose to do surgeries or transition versus like the general population doing things that honestly we as a society have
Mhm,
affirmed, right? The folks that are doing
mhm,
that,
mhm.
um, they oftentimes the folks that are the regret on transitioning and trans surgeries is very low. Like the people that
Mhm.
actually opt into making those choices for themselves are generally reported by both themselves, their family, their friends, their caregivers as being like happy, calm, more successful, mentally thriving. And then, like you said, and a lot of people who do they have one or two things that they're like, this isn't working. I need my nose job or whatever.
Yep.
Those folks also usually pretty happy. And then there's the folks that get really like, they just are trying to pursue something else through that.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the majority of those people are cisgender people seeking to
Yes.
affirm themselves in their cisgender, like culturally accepted dominant way of being. and
Mhm.
and so to turn it into this is dangerous because of like this very small population who's
Yes.
actually experiencing a lot of positive results.
Mhm.
It to me, it's bullying, and it's also clearly a manipulation tactic to turn
Yeah.
us against one another. Um, and I want to go like what you were saying about being feminine. I shaved my head when I turned 30. I never really wanted to. Like when I came out as a lesbian, I told my girlfriend later on, I was like, I'm never shaving my head and I'm never being an activist. I did both of those things. So, but those are my prejudices, right? And I was like, all right. When I turned 30, I was like, I'm going to shave my head. And people freaked out. Like they freaked out about it because I always been, I'm not super femme, but I always had long
Yeah.
hair. And so I did it, and my community was it was so interesting the way they responded. And then actually out in the world, people treated me so differently when I had short hair, when I had a shaved head. I
Really?
was like, oh, I
Like positive treatment or negative
negatively,
treatment?
or maybe I wouldn't say necessarily negative, but it was just really different. Like how they perceived me because this was exposed
Mhm,
was
mhm.
like,
Right.
and I, being contrary to part of me was like, I guess I should keep my head shaved. But honestly, I prefer long hair, so I have it. Like it's not,
Yeah.
but it was weird to me that that would matter to the people that cared about me. Like honestly, I told everyone I was going to do it at my 30th birthday. So like at the end of the night, I pulled out the clippers, I handed them to my best friend. I was like, it's time. One of my friends started crying. I was like,
I
what is
yes.
happening?
There are people who I would love like we have to do a beauty segment and dig into the whole crying when the hair is cut kind of thing as if like all of your life is over. It's just
It's
it's
weird,
I
right?
get it. I should say I get it. I understand that some people think, well, I'm losing something and I'm becoming less than. So now, or I know when I cut it in New York, amazing positive responses because
Mhm.
now my face was out there. So
Yeah.
I'd had people staring at me, but not because I was bald. Like, okay, so when
Mhm.
the guy I had a small afro, when he cut it off, because I was loving my afro, I wanted to be like Foxy Brown. It had like this beautiful afro, but it wasn't in my jeans. So when he cut
Mm.
off what little afro I did have, I cried because my afro was gone.
Mhm.
I said, "Nah, I got to start over." But people are like, "Oh my gosh, you're beautiful," and I thought, who are they talking to? Because because I was hiding behind my hair.
Yeah.
But then when I got to the South, i.e., Texas specifically, it was, "Are you into guys? Or are you into girls?" I said to
Mhm.
myself, I don't have the patience for this right here. Like this, talk about putting on some whole new armor. Like you will quickly find your voice when you're combated with ignorance on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I think that's really true.
Quickly find it. I'm like, what? But like the other day, before we move on, I was at this photography conference. So photographers, and there are models that are around us, right? So and they have like amazing bone structure and height and whatnot. But this
Yeah.
lady comes and sit downs next to me and just kind of stares at me. Very odd. A very odd way of breaking the ice. So I looked at her and I was like, yeah. She said, I just love your look. I love your look. I love how you walk in, your flair. I love it. And
Nice.
I thought, thank you. I don't know if staring at me like I'm in some zoo is a good thing as a black woman, right? Because you don't look like me, and it just comes across kind of odd. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like I'm like, man, you're gonna have to figure out how to use your words versus
Mhm.
just staring at somebody. Now I don't know where she was from. I would thought this is different, but it for some people, think about it, for some women that I have talked to, being able to be this bald and still walk with your head held high is like, how do you do it?
Mhm.
I really have to dig into this foolishness. Like I got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Got to dig deeper into it because there's so much. Again, just being seen as a woman, women
Yep.
have hair.
Well, right, and that's the interesting thing, like, for you and for me when I shaved my head, it wasn't just that, like, we could have gender affirming options, it was that people wanted us and even pressured us to have to dislike
Yes,
our choice that didn't affirm their version of what
yes,
female is supposed to look like.
yeah. Yeah, that was
And
my dad too. I mean, he
right?
he came around. We were
Mhm.
at the breakfast table, myself and my brothers, and he said, "So, how long is this look gonna last?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, but what do you mean?" He's like, Do you ever think about growing your hair out?" And I was like, "Not even." I said, "Pops, I am pulling mad numbers." And he was like, "What?" And my brother's like, "Pops, when she comes to the barbershop, all the heads turn." I was like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
doing good over here, old man. Don't worry about it."
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm good.
He
Yeah.
was just like, because it's not how he saw it, and it's only after he wrapped his arms around. He was like, okay, well, I guess my daughter is getting guys to talk to her, and I'm not concerned.
Yeah.
Again, we have to do another conversation.
Yeah.
Another conversation. But here are some of the things about when we work on letting everybody know that gender affirming care is beyond care for those who are trans or non binary. The research and development in gender affirming care contribute to advancements in medical science that can benefit the general population. For example, again, hormone therapies and surgical techniques developed for gender affirming care can also be applied to other medical conditions or aesthetic preferences. It's bigger than just the people who they're telling you to be afraid of. It's bigger than that. It's just, we have so much work to do as, I don't want to say it. I mean, I'll say as humans. Sometimes I feel like I'm from some other planet, but whatever.
Yeah.
So much work to do. And it starts with education and, as you and I are doing, having civil discourse.
Yeah, talking about stuff.
And talking about stuff. Because if you bring it up, people say, well, that's for trans, and it's like, it's not. I mean, the fact that we had a whole talk on cosmetic surgery should tell you it's bigger than just these people. And I do it in air quotes because that's not me. I wouldn't.
No, exactly. Well, but it's that weird. Like, I think about growing up too, the times that I was behaving in a non-gender aligned way, right? Like if I drove a truck or I ran an event, I got a lot of like positive feedback, right? Like as a woman who's willing to do boy things,
right?
Then somehow I'm super cool. And so I feel like that's the thing, that to go back to that, like the infantilizing or the diminishment of femaleness. Like if men do things that are considered female, they get a lot of negative feedback.
Yes.
But if women do things that are considered male, they get a lot of positive feedback. And so like there's a lot to it. But for example, it used to be, and I hope we're not going back to this, that if you came out as gay or lesbian, there were some really significantly negative things that could happen. You were subjected to more violence. You had fewer rights. There was a lot, and there's a lot of social scientists who kind of who have posited, and I think in a very a believable way, that that's a way to keep men and women kind of in line. And so now that it's become more acceptable to be in a same-sex relationship and less likely to cost you your job or to cause you to be exposed to violence, caveats based on where you are and how gender norm you are, right?
Yeah.
Now they've switched that to the trans community, and in a way that it's gross, right? Like they're just using a population, a very small population that doesn't have the ability really to fight back, to reaffirm that, like, don't step out of line because we want to keep things the way that they are. And I know change is scary, but this is like, it's, I just go back to, it's gross and it's bullying. I can't even come up with a better term, because the thing is, it seems stupid and reactive. And I do think there's a lot of people who are simply reacting to propaganda and to the media machine. And I feel like the folks that are running the game, they're doing it, like you said, for money. They're for money and power and votes. And they're using a group of people that are not typically very powerful to get more people to vote for them, to send them money, and and it's just, we've been had, honestly.
And that's if you know, because there are people who are trans, people are none the wiser.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like, well, I don't believe in blah, blah, blah. It's like, but your best friend that you just met 3 years ago is trans and you didn't even know, because it's not like, because that's how, it's not even that important. Right.
No,
it's not that important. The fact that you made a genuine bond, have gone glamping and did all the things.
Yeah.
Never none the wiser, never concerned, never felt like you were at risk. And all of a sudden, now that you know, you're like, what? Please enlighten me. Like it's, we need to add, because it's the same thing with segregation.
Yeah.
The reason to have a white only water fountain and a black, because I didn't want to catch something. Well, what would you catch?
Right.
Like what's gonna happen if these two kids share a classroom or the bus? But there's always, we need another target. There's got to be another target somewhere. The only thing people caught, if we really want to talk about it, is they caught some feelings. Caught some feelings and made some babies. That's about it. Now, some people picked up a couple of recipes, maybe some new dances, but other than that,
yeah,
what happened?
yeah.
But we probably need to dig deeper into that psyche of fear, being mediocre. You know what, Aicila, we could go on for days, but there's clearly something there.
Yeah. Well, and the thing
Awareness and education.
is,
So, increasing awareness about gender affirming care encourages broader education about gender diversity and the importance of personal identity. This knowledge can lead to more empathetic interactions and relationships in all areas of life, including workplaces, schools, and communities. Yes.
well, and that what's interesting to me is that I have a friend whose grandfather, so in the early part of the 1900s, had an extra closet of dresses. And everybody knew, the whole family knew. It was just a thing. And that's what grandpa did sometimes, was wear dresses. He also served, I think, in the Navy. Like, you know, and I feel like if you look at history, I mean, if you look at the long, there's always been people who go in between whatever our perception of gender is at the time. And what it is changes based on culture and based on society and all sorts of other things. And like a friend of mine, her dad was an international teacher and she grew up in Africa. And she's like, the women there were so strong. So when people talk about women's work, I'd be like, yeah, you got to carry stuff. You got to be, got to be able to fight. Like she had a totally different, I don't remember which part of Africa was, but that's where she grew up. It was like women's work was not cooking and cleaning, that she thought that as men's work. She, her, like all of that because of the world that she was raised in. And so I think that it's ultimately when and obviously it's bigger than just gender affirming care when we talk about gender, but specifically for everyone who hears this, just think about one thing that you do to feel better about yourself. And imagine someone saying that you're not allowed to do that because they've decided you don't fit whatever story they have.
Right.
And you would feel terrible. And I'm not saying like what we've talked about before, you don't have to go out and volunteer or be best friends with LGBTQ people. I do think if you could take a moment to be empathetic and really think about how would you feel if somebody said you couldn't wear pants to work today? Because women used to not be able to wear pants to work.
Right.
And if someone said, like, in addition to just like your own personal style and comfort, wouldn't that just feel super intrusive? Like, are we really interested in being that intrusive that we want to tell people what they can put in their closet and wear out to the store? I mean, it's overly intrusive and it really doesn't match. Most people don't. You can barely, if you're like me, you're barely keeping track of what you're up to. So why try to be worried about what someone else might be up to maybe somewhere at some point?
This talk about less government, and I was talking with some people online. It told me that the average American citizen has no idea what the government does for them on a daily basis.
Yeah.
No idea. When you say less government, I agree in regards to get out of my body parts, right? Don't be concerned with who I am marrying, right? To a certain extent, like we're not marrying kids. So keep that in mind. But the very basic, simple things that does not require government assistance. Like we don't need you there. I need you there in terms of clean water, in terms of preserving this earth, like things of that nature, work, safety, make sure that kids can be kids and they're not put in really crazy places. Yeah, like stuff like that. We need you for stuff like that. I don't need you here to tell me that this is a man and that's a woman, or that they can't do. Like I don't need you there. But we don't need you for that.
No, I mean, who goes around trying to categorize everybody anyway?
Right. Or if I happen to have a miscarriage that I can't, like, I don't need you to tell me about those things about my health. I don't need you for that.
Yeah.
I don't need you for that. Or that even the fact that I haven't had kids, But I may want kids one day. I can't take out this uterus and do whatever I want. Like, that's stupid. I don't need you. I don't need you for that.
Yeah.
That's where it goes too far. That's too far. Or what faith I am allowed to practice. I don't need you for that. We
No.
don't need government for that. We need it
Mm-mm.
for other things. The things that, well, somebody's trying to get rid of. But let me not go there because that's not our topic today.
No, not today. Although it would be fun to talk about, like, what is it what is it that we do want or need
Yeah.
government for? Like,
Yes.
in that way, because and I get it, it's tricky, but I think that would be an interesting conversation in that, because I agree with you. Like, I don't have I have some feelings about the current expression of libertarians, because they're definitely kind of entitled, in my opinion, and I feel like they miss out on the fact that, and they also sometimes express things that it's like, no, you kind of need people to make sure that the lights are working, or
Yes.
whatever. You want a fire brigade. Like, there are some basic things that affect I live in a condo. There's like 12 units in my little building.
Okay.
And if somebody in my building has a fire hazard, then I would be affected by that. My building would burn down. So
Mhm.
they ask everybody once a year to like go through and provide proof that they have appropriate fire alerts and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
Because that does actually, I mean, it would suck for them to lose their house. I don't want them to, but I definitely don't want them to burn my house down.
Right.
Like,
It
that's
does
where I get real
impact me.
involved.
That does impact me. It's like,
Right.
yeah,
And I
this one
think
guy, who is this? There was a guy on TikTok when he was like, I don't trust the government and their messaging is always. I was like, so you're telling me that the FDA told you don't eat that boar's head because it has listeria? You don't trust that?
right.
You're telling me you wanna roll the dice on that one? Happy trails, kid. Happy trails.
Mhm.
'Cause I'm
Yeah.
not fighting with you over something that ridiculous. Like, come on, man. Like, yeah, okay. Whatever. But here's this: policy and legal frameworks advocating for policies that support gender affirming care can lead to broader healthcare reforms that ensure better access and equity in medical services for everyone. Improved healthcare policies benefit not only transgender individuals, but also cisgender individuals who may require similar services for different medical reasons. We just said that. We just said it. It's not just for them.
Mm-mm.
But because it's someone who doesn't look like me, they are now the other, and now that becomes a problem. It's like, but if you impact it for them, it's also impacting you, right?
And
Like,
here's
I
the
just we're all linked. We are linked
Mhm.
in this world. No one
Yep.
operates really in a silo.
No. Well, and
Uh-uh.
so several years ago, there was a movement to do what they called centering and a lot of like nonprofit activism and policy work,
Mhm.
which was, they said, like, put transgender Black women at the center and make sure
Mm,
things work for them. And if it works for them, it's going to work for Chad in the office, because one, the more oppressed someone is, the more aware they are of everybody else. So any
yeah.
solution they come up with is going to be multifaceted and multi-effective.
Mhm.
And when we support and care for the people, and I also think that's how you know what a society, like, it's how a society treats the most vulnerable people really tells you a
Right.
lot about who they are, right? And when they're the center and we really like work to make things work there, it will really work for everybody else. That
Yep.
healthcare will get better for everybody.
Yep.
And things that you didn't know bothered you, like, why do people talk about whether or not I have long hair or short hair? And as it becomes socially less acceptable to do that because we're trying to be more inclusive, suddenly it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about stupid comments. That feels good. It wasn't life threatening for me, but it was irritating. And so the ripple effect is so profoundly positive when we actually approach things from this way, that is also, in my opinion, ethically and morally
Yeah.
correct, that it's kind of mind-boggling that people are so resistant to it.
Well, I think about the dress codes. And I'm going to use Texas because there are still some schools here that are very clear that be you black or white, a young man's hair should stop right here. It should be like a buzz cut, pretty much, because it impacts them learning in class. Since when has hair ever impacted a child learning in class?
Mhm.
please enlighten me. And even better, it got to the place where they were like, well, this is just what being a well cleaned person looks like. It looks like this. Well, according to whom?
Yep.
Who made that decision? Now, check it. Some of these dress codes are from like way back when.
Mm-hmm.
Segregation, what have you. So there was this one idea of what it all looked like, which we have seen for persons who are not Caucasian, that you had a plethora of news anchors who would wear wigs to hide their natural hair because, applying that kind of heat and chemicals on a consistent basis, your hair would fall out.
Yeah.
Right? But it's the whole idea of, well, let me look tamed. Let me look presentable. Well, who told you that was presentable? Who agreed to that? Now, this is again the whole deal of who were you to judge somebody or to make this the definition of. But that's a lot of unlearning and letting go of some stuff, just saying.
Yeah.
But that's why you fight for the Crown Act. Now, the Crown Act may have very well said, hey, we're talking about black hair, but it also works for those kids, those Caucasian kids who want their long hair. It works for those guys too. That says you can't judge me by my hair.
Yep.
Everybody,
so when we censor Black women, everybody benefits. Like the Crown Act is a perfect example. You're like, I got you.
Everybody benefits. But we don't have it today, but we will come back to this.
Yeah.
To talk about how, your point of how you treat the person who is the most vulnerable says a great deal. Says a great deal. But I also want to flip it. And I know I can't get into the psyche. I don't have the patience. I really thought I did, because there was a gentleman who made some really disparaging comments on Facebook during the height of our political season. And he talked about Black women and whatnot. And I just said to myself, if I see this guy at the photo conference, I'm liable to go to jail. And it just so happened that he snuck up behind me, right? That whole, hey, haven't seen you in a while. And I thought, ooh, let me just, now it was a Sunday. I immediately went into some silent prayers like, dear God, please bless all me right now, because this one, he about to catch his hands. So I made it clear that we're not friendly, right? Like, you know how like the body language separates you from people. And if there were places where I saw him coming, we would turn. It's like, if I have to avoid trouble, I'm going to avoid you. That's how we do it.
Yeah.
But we're not going to act like so. Although I would like to dig into the brain of persons who operate that way. Keep in mind, he's disabled. But I'm sure he doesn't see us in that acronym, because he don't see himself that, because but I would love to dig into what is so fearful that you have to create policies and attack people just because of what? Like, what exactly are you afraid of? What are you losing? I mean, you could either just get your shit together. You could do that. You could bring your best self, and then we could all thrive. Or you could stay in this operating out of fear, where you want to burn it all down, because if I can't have it, nobody can have it.
Right. Well, and I'd like to go back to my earlier point. I really do think a lot of it is that, like, there's a one cookie that's left on the plate, and instead of trying to figure out where the other 10 went, we're fighting over that last cookie. And honestly, even we could just share it, like, and figure out, well, how do we get more cookies? Like, it doesn't have to be like this. But I mean, I love cookies, so it's also an analogy that makes me really happy. But
let's make more cookies.
Let's make more cookies. We can always make more cookies. We get better cookies, make different cookies. Instead of just like, it's interesting because there's that weird feeling of like, if there are more people who have rights or who get to express themselves as women or whatever it is, then somehow I'm less able to. And it's really not, that's just not how it works, actually.
No, there's
not like a predetermined number of woman spots. And we're
not
losing one. We're not losing any woman
spots left. There's 100 spots left, right? But I was riding home the other day from Houston. So 4 hours of thoughts, right? This is where all the podcast ideas come from, people. And I thought to myself, I can't imagine a world without diversity. Like imagine just how boring it would be.
Yeah.
To be around people who look like you, who have the same thought as you. Like I gotta think you're like stunted in growth because you're not exposed to other perspectives and life experiences and food and music and culture. Like now
Mhm.
these people in America who want to celebrate Cinco de Mayo, although they have no idea what it's really about, but they love them some tacos on Taco Tuesday,
Yeah.
right? Like we love to appropriate other people's cultures and stuff. Imagine the world without all of this diversity, all of this seasoning, as I like to say. Think about a
Yeah.
gumbo, a
Yeah.
really good gumbo, not some of these people who try to pretend, but really good, really good gumbo
Mhm.
without like fresh crab and andouille sausage. And you know what I'm saying? Like all the things that make a dish a dish.
Yeah.
It would be so boring. So I go back and say, why would anybody want a world without flavor? Unless you just
I
I'm speechless. I'm like, I can't even imagine.
when I think I don't know, like I feel like it's like you're talking about that gentleman that didn't realize he was part of our group, right?
Mhm.
And it's something I saw a lot working in queer activism was there was like a weird disconnect at times, like of the I'm almost like if people don't like you because you're an immigrant or because you're black or because you're disabled, they're certainly not going to like me. Like that just seemed very clear to me that we are actually all on the same team, whether I acknowledge it or not. And I think that it does. Like the first time I started working in community, it was hard because
Mhm.
I didn't know anything. It was
Mhm.
ignorant. I didn't even know how ignorant I was. And I had to learn, I had to listen and learn and like really get a sense of the different ways of thinking about things. And I'm always learning, right? That's the other thing. There's no arriving. When you
Right.
work in diverse communities, you are never going to get there because you're always going to run into something new to learn. I personally love learning new things. And at first, I felt overwhelmed and incompetent, which I hate feeling incompetent. And I just dug in and I read all sorts of books.
Mhm.
I have a few probably I'll recommend. We can put in the show notes.
Yes.
I went, like I said, I listened to people. I went to films. It's even easier now. Like you can get online and if you want to learn about different communities and cultures, you can find podcasts where people are
Mhm.
talking about stuff.
Mhm.
You don't have to go invade somebody's space or ask inappropriate questions. And you
Yeah.
can get all sorts of real-time information about different experiences and really learn things and learn how to show up in a way that's respectful and learn how to adapt to say, oh, okay, I don't know this
Mm.
situation. These are the skills I've learned to be able to step into a community experience and actually show respect and
Mhm.
behave in a way that's clear. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm working to learn. People are so kind when you do
Yes.
that. When you show up with curiosity, when you show up with willingness to be taught,
Mm.
that like it's people are 98% just like welcoming and kind. If you walk in entitled, ignorant, and loud, that's a different story. And that, and for me, that's the thing I think that people run into is they like to feel comfortable. I mean, let me even put it like I like to feel comfortable too. There are times when I just want to sit in my house and eat the food I like and watch a show I've watched before
Yes.
and like have a comfort experience. And I'm 100% going to say comfort experiences are great. Do it.
Mhm.
And also, as you said, expand your comfort zone.
Yes.
Go to a festival that you wouldn't go to. Listen to a podcast by a group of people that you've never interacted with personally. I challenge everybody here to find a podcast that's got genderqueer or trans people talking about their experiences and just listen to one. That's it. Find one, just listen to one, and then ask yourself, does it really feel that different from how I go about life and the things that I'm trying to learn? And I bet you dollars to donuts, like I'm doing donuts, you do dollars. They you'll come away realizing how much different. And I'm not once again, I'm not saying go ask intrusive questions. Don't try to be
No.
best friends with everybody, but have a little curiosity and you would be surprised at how much less threatening differences feel.
Mhm.
That's my I guess rant for the day.
Well, I believe that's the way that we are going to end it because that was the sermon, Aicila. That was the sermon. That was the conversation, and here's your homework.
Here's your homework, guys.
That was it. That was it. We will definitely add those books into the show notes, unless you have some right now that you want to just throw on top of your head.
One that I read a very long time ago, it's called As Nature Made Him, and it talks about a boy who was he had a when he was 10 months old, they had a surgery. They were doing a, what is it called, circumcision, and they had an accident and they actually fried his penis off. And
What?
so and he was a twin, and so they spent like 12 years saying, like, this doctor at Johns Hopkins was like, oh, you can make your kid any gender you want. So he was in this program for 12 years. He was told that he was a girl from the time after that happened, that he was a fraternal twin. He spent 12 years or 14 years, some very long period of time, believing he was a girl, being told by his family he was a girl, but he wasn't. He never felt like he was a girl. And then finally, when his adult time, he transitioned back to being a male. And so it's a very interesting story that kind of talks about the how you know your gender. You know, he knew his gender, even though his whole family they were following the instructions of these doctors. Like, they were doing their best, and he's no blame to them. But it's a really interesting story about how gender really, your experience of your gender is very intrinsic, and and even when you're being told with very deliberate consistency that you're not that. And then another one, My Husband Betty, was written by a woman who was married to someone who identified not as transgender, but as a cross-dresser, and sort of her challenges around understanding and accepting his gender experience, because she was like, I felt like, for me, transition, she was like, as a woman, the first thing I think of is like being in service to people. And like, when I meet my husband's friends and their cross-dressing experience, their first thought of being a woman is wearing short skirts. And it felt like an attack on my own understanding. And so I feel like both of those books are really great entry points for people who are maybe interested in learning and are coming at it. They were some of the first books that I read that really helped me to understand more about my own like gender identity journey, and also the places where I would get sort of reactive because of the way that I was raised, or the assumptions that I made about the impact of shifts or changes and how the gender experience was revealed. So both of those books I found to be very helpful, well-researched, very thoughtful invitations to understanding your experience of gender in a different way.
Sweet. Thank you. Thank you so much for offering those too, because we like to provide resources when we have them.
Yeah.
Everybody, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Not Dinner Conversations. We don't know what's next on the menu because there's just so much. We literally do have a list. We have a list for our menu. But we will see you guys in the next one.
Bye.